The rich, savory scent of steak permeated the dining room, but to me, it might as well have been the sterile atmosphere of an autopsy room. Jessica had gone all out: candles, an expensive bottle of wine, and a carefully prepared meal, the kind she only ever made when she wanted something, or when she was feeling guilty. The last time she had cooked like this was after she wrecked my car and let me believe, for 2 whole days, that some unknown vandal had been responsible. But at least back then, she had pretended to feel bad. Tonight, there was no such pretense. Instead of remorse, there was something else in her eyes. Anticipation. Like she was watching the final seconds tick down on a bomb she had set herself. I sliced into the steak, chewed, swallowed. The tension in the air was thick, pressing down on me. "What's the occasion?" I finally asked. Jessica tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing into a firm line as if she were debating whether an answer was even worth the effort. Then, with a casual shrug, she said, "I just felt like it." I nodded, as I always did. Because that was my pattern. I let things slide. I let things go. I told myself that if I didn't push, everything would stay steady, manageable. Maybe that was why I hadn't noticed it sooner. For a while, we ate in silence. Jessica barely touched her food. Instead, her nails drummed absently against the surface of her wine glass, and every so often, she glanced at her phone, tilting it just slightly, just enough to shield the screen from my view. Then, in one smooth motion, she set down her fork, dabbed at her lips with the napkin, and spoke. "I'm leaving you." The words hit like a gut punch, knocking the breath from my lungs. They clung to the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. The room around me no longer felt real. It was as though the floor had vanished beneath me, leaving me weightless, bracing for an impact that had yet to come. Jessica leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I've already packed. I was going to wait until the weekend, but," she exhaled sharply through her nose, the sound filled more with frustration than regret. "It doesn't really matter, does it?" I blinked, trying to process her words. "You what?" I said. "I'm leaving," she repeated, her voice devoid of hesitation. "I don't want to do this anymore." The ease with which she said it, like she was canceling an unused gym membership, made my stomach turn. Like our entire life together had been nothing more than a trial run, something she had decided wasn't worth the long-term investment. I placed my fork down, only now realizing how tightly I had been gripping it. My voice came out steady, but inside, everything was unraveling. "Is there someone else?" For the briefest moment, her eyes flickered, just a fraction of a second of hesitation. But then she scoffed. "Oh my God. Do you really think?" The doorbell rang. Jessica flinched. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. She recovered quickly, pushing her chair back as if nothing had happened. "I'll get it." She was already moving before my brain could catch up. I stood, though not as quickly as I should have. My legs felt stiff, heavy. Something was wrong. More wrong than it already was. My heart pounded against my ribs, an instinctual warning blaring in the back of my mind. A deep, primal certainty that whatever was about to happen next would change everything. Jessica reached for the doorknob. I took a step forward. The door swung open. And then, everything fell apart. There are moments in life that stretch, slowing to an unbearable crawl, where the weight of what's happening slams into you with a force that leaves you gasping. This was one of those moments. The door swung open. On the other side stood a man I had never seen before. Tall, dark-haired, a little younger than me. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, unbuttoned just enough to seem intentional. There was something about him, an effortless confidence, the kind that comes with knowing exactly where you belong. Then his gaze shifted past Jessica and landed on me. For a second, his expression changed. Surprise. Then hesitation. Then something else entirely. Something smug. He hadn't expected me to be here. I turned to Jessica, searching her face for any sign that this was as unexpected for her as it was for me. But instead of shock or guilt, she just exhaled through her nose, visibly irritated. Not caught. Not ashamed. Just annoyed. She turned fully toward me, blocking my view of the man at the door. "Ethan, can we not do this right now?" I laughed. Actually laughed, even though my chest felt like it was caving in on itself. "Do what, exactly?" Jessica's jaw tightened. "You're making this a thing." "It's not a thing." I glanced at the stranger again. He shifted uncomfortably, his weight shifting between his feet, glancing between us like he had walked straight into a brewing storm. "Who is this?" My voice was eerily calm. Jessica sighed, rubbing her temple like she was dealing with an exhausting inconvenience. "It doesn't matter." I stared at her, waiting, willing something to make sense. And then, Everything clicked. The packed bags. The carefully planned dinner. The way she had flinched when the doorbell rang. She wasn't just leaving me. She had planned to step out of this house and straight into his car. A cold sensation crawled up my spine, my fingers instinctively curling into fists. You're serious? Jessica rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. Ethan, I told you. I don't want to do this anymore. She barely spared the man a glance as she gestured toward him. Nathan and I. Nathan. His name was Nathan. I exhaled slowly, pushing my chair back completely. So you're just walking out? Just like that. Jessica didn't hesitate. Yeah, I am. Nathan shifted again, rubbing the back of his neck. Maybe I should. Nathan obeyed without question, nodding as if trained to follow orders, and retreated toward the sleek black car waiting outside our house. I watched him go before turning my attention back to Jessica. So this is it. My voice barely rose above a whisper, much quieter than I had anticipated. After 8 years? Jessica gave a small shrug, indifferent. It ended a long time ago, Ethan. You just didn't see it. I stepped forward, just enough to catch the complete absence of remorse in her eyes. And in that instant, I understood she wasn't sorry. She wasn't regretful. She wasn't even anxious. To her, this wasn't a betrayal. It was simply a choice. A decision she had made long before I had any say in it. And that was the moment my heartbreak began to transform into something else. As I stood there, the sound of my own breathing was louder than anything else in the room. Jessica had already shifted her attention away from me, glancing at her phone, probably texting Nathan to let him know she'd be out soon. Like I was nothing. Like I had never been anything. The anger came fast, sharp, like something inside me cracked wide open. Not just the heartbreak. Not just the sense of betrayal. Something deeper, something I hadn't even known was buried inside me. Jessica stood with her arms crossed. Weight shifted to one hip, as if this was nothing more than an inconvenient conversation she had to get through. I searched her face for something. Anything that resembled the woman I had married. But all I saw was a stranger. A stranger who had already packed her bags, already made her decision, already moved on. Nathan's car remained idling outside, headlights stretching long shadows across the living room walls. He was waiting as if this were just another transaction, as if he were simply picking up a package. I exhaled through my nose, steadying myself. How long? Jessica sighed. Ethan. No. My voice was sharper this time. How long have you been lying to me? She flinched at the word, lying. As if I was the one being unfair by saying it aloud. As if I was the one making things worse. That hesitation was all the answer I needed. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake or a lapse in judgment. She knew exactly how long. A breath left me, slow and heavy. Unbelievable. I raked a hand through my hair, the weight of every ignored moment crashing down at once. The late nights, the sudden shifts in her demeanor, the way she had begun treating me like a roommate instead of a husband. Jessica took a step forward, lowering her voice as if she still had some control over the situation. Ethan, listen. I shook my head. No, you don't get to tell me to listen. My pulse pounded in my ears, a dull roar beneath my skin. You deceived me. You planned this. I swallowed the rest of the sentence because, suddenly, I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear myself say it. Jessica exhaled slowly, looking away for the first time. I was going to tell you sooner. A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. Oh yeah? When? Before or after I walked in on you packing your things to leave with him? Her jaw tightened. Her nails tapped against her arm in irritation. As if I was the one inconveniencing her. As if she was the one who had the right to be annoyed. I didn't want it to happen like this, she muttered. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. How did you want it to happen, Jessica? A heartfelt goodbye? A letter? A text message? She didn't respond. Because there was no answer that wouldn't make her look worse. Outside, the engine of Nathan's car revved slightly, a reminder that he was still there. Still waiting. Jessica glanced at the door, and it finally sank in. She wasn't just leaving me. She was done with me. She wasn't looking for an argument. She wasn't seeking closure. She had made up her mind long ago. And the worst part? She believed she was entitled to this. Like she was the protagonist in her own story, and I was just some unfortunate side character who had to deal with the fallout. I stepped back, pushing down the tightness in my throat. You really don't care, do you? For a brief second, something flickered across Jessica's face, something unreadable. But just as quickly, it vanished. I care, she said flatly. Just not the way you want me to. The words hit harder than I expected. Colder. Heavier. The world seemed to shift slightly, the weight of everything pressing in at once. But before I could speak, before I could even process it, Jessica turned, grabbed her bags, and headed for the door. And just like that, the life I thought I had was gone. Or at least, that's what she believed. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. Jessica reached for the doorknob, her grip steady, her movement smooth, like she had rehearsed this moment in her head over and over. Like I was just an obstacle in her carefully planned exit. Not a person. And something about that made me snap. Before she could step outside, before she could disappear into the night as if she were some villain in a badly written story, I caught her wrist. Not forcefully. Just enough to stop her. Just enough to halt her. Just enough to make her turn my way. The moment she registered my touch, she stiffened, her head whipping around sharply, her eyes widening for a brief second before narrowing into something colder, more detached. Ethan. Let go. Her voice was low, firm, carrying an unmistakable warning. But not fear. Because she knew me. Understood that I wasn't the type of man who would ever hurt her. And maybe that certainty made her bolder. I didn't release her. Not yet. You owe me an answer. Jessica let out a slow sigh, tilting her head back slightly as if weary of the conversation. We've already been over this. No, we haven't, I countered. You spoke. I reacted. And now you're trying to leave before I've had the chance to process any of it. My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of eerie stillness that comes when someone is standing right at the edge of something dangerous. She exhaled sharply, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. Ethan, I told you. I don't want this anymore. I don't love you anymore. There it was. The final blow. And she delivered it without hesitation, without a flicker of doubt. I felt it land, felt it tear through me, burrowing deep. Somewhere it would remain, somewhere it would fester. Jessica pulled her wrist free from my grip, stepping back as if that was it. As if there was nothing left to say. Then, without another glance, she turned, flung the door open, and walked away. Straight toward him. Nathan was already out of the car, standing by the passenger side like some failed version of a knight in shining armor. His hands rested in his pockets, his stance relaxed. But I caught the way his eyes flicked toward me, watching, gauging. Jessica didn't pause. Didn't look back. She strode right to him, handed over her bag, and let him place it in the car like this was normal. Like she was just leaving a job, not a marriage. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside, sharp and biting. Nathan's gaze flickered to me once more before he quickly looked away, as if deciding I wasn't a threat. Wrong. I moved forward, slow and measured, my pulse pounding beneath my skin. Something in my expression must have shifted because Nathan finally squared his shoulders, raising his hands slightly, palms out. Hey, man. His voice was carefully neutral. I get that this sucks. A hollow, humorless laugh escaped me. Oh, do you? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Look, I don't want any trouble. Jessica, standing beside him, finally turned to look at me again. And what I saw in her face, it wasn't guilt. It wasn't hesitation. It was relief. Like a weight had been lifted. Like she had been waiting for this. That was what shattered me. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. Not even her walking away. But the realization that, to her, I had been something to escape from. That I had been holding her back all along. My jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. But I forced myself to breathe, to swallow down the searing anger clawing its way up my throat. Jessica. My voice was steady. Too steady. It even unsettled me. Just one last question. She tilted her head slightly, arms folding across her chest. What? I looked at her, the woman I had once loved. The stranger she had become. Was it worth it? Jessica blinked. Just once. And for the first time tonight, something flickered across her expression. Doubt. Faint. Barely there. But enough. And that? That was enough for me. Without waiting for her response, I turned around, walked back inside, and shut the door behind me. Let her leave. Let her go. Because the real story? It was only just beginning. Silence. That was the first thing I noticed the moment the door clicked shut. The house, once alive with laughter, heated arguments, whispered conversations in the dark, was now empty. I stood motionless, my fingers still wrapped around the doorknob, staring into nothingness. The sound of my own breathing seemed too loud, my pulse drumming heavily in my ears. My chest ached, not in a way I could describe, but in a way that felt permanent. Jessica was gone. Just like that. I should have felt something, anger, relief, anything. But instead, there was just a hollow space where something used to be. A void. Then, my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. Probably nothing more than a useless notification, a spam email, a news alert I had no interest in. But then it buzzed again. And again. And again. A strange unease settled in my stomach. Slowly, I pulled the phone from my pocket, my hands surprisingly steady despite the storm brewing inside me. 3 new messages. The first was from Mark, my best friend. "Dude, are you okay?" The second was from my sister, Lauren. "Call me. Now." And the third made my breath catch. An unknown number. No name. No context. Just 6 words. "You deserve to know the truth." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain whether to reply, call, do anything. But before I could decide, another message came through from the same number. "Check your email." A chill ran down my spine. My email? What was this? Without hesitation, I tapped open my inbox, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs as I scrolled through unread messages, junk mail, bills, work updates, until I saw it. Subject: Jessica. No sender name. The email address was unfamiliar, a random string of characters that meant nothing to me. The timestamp? Just 10 minutes ago, right before Jessica had stepped out that door. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitation gripping me. Every instinct in my body screamed that I wasn't supposed to see this. And yet, that only made me more determined to open it. With a tap, the email loaded instantly. What I saw made my breath catch. My grip on the phone wavered as I nearly dropped it. Attachments. Photos. Screenshots. Conversations. Jessica and Nathan. The evidence stretched back for months, text messages, emails, pictures of them together. Some were taken at bars, others at our favorite restaurant. Some were in places I didn't even recognize. But it wasn't just her and Nathan. There were others. Different men. Each time-stamped. Each confirming things I had never even considered possible. Jessica, flirting. Jessica, arranging meetings. Jessica, spinning the same intricate web of lies over and over. Nathan wasn't her first. Not even close. A wave of cold shock washed over me. My vision blurred. My hands turned to ice. I forced myself to scroll through more of the screenshots, battling the overwhelming urge to throw my phone across the room. Every click revealed another betrayal, another carefully hidden deception. And then, at the bottom of the email, a final message. "She played you. But now? Now you play her." I stared at those words, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then, for the first time that night, a slow, razor-sharp smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. Jessica thought this was over. She had no idea. I reread the message, letting its meaning settle deep into my bones. "She played you. But now? Now you play her." A surge of something electric coursed through me. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. It was something more. Purpose. Jessica had believed she was the mastermind. That she had orchestrated her departure flawlessly. That every detail, down to the moment she stepped out the door, had been carefully controlled. But there was one thing she had overlooked. Me. I scrolled through the screenshots again, my jaw clenching tighter with every revelation. Jessica's deception stretched back far longer than I had imagined. And Nathan? He was just one of many. Different names, different faces, each played the same way. The same recycled pet names. The same manipulative charm. How many? 5? 6? Maybe more. Some of the conversations overlapped, mere days apart. I saw how she spoke to them. Worse, I saw how she spoke about me. It's complicated. My husband is nice. Too nice. He wouldn't understand. He's clueless. I don't even have to try that hard. Honestly, I think he'd forgive me if I ever got caught. That's the kind of guy he is. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. Jessica thought I was weak. She believed I was the kind of man who would sit in this house, lost in thought, endlessly wondering where everything had gone wrong while she played house with Nathan. She was wrong. I clicked back to the email and stared at the number that had sent it. Someone had gone out of their way to send me this. Someone wanted me to know. Who? My fingers moved steadily across the keyboard as I typed a response. Who are you? Why are you sending me this? The message sent instantly. And within seconds, my phone vibrated with a reply. Let's just say I've been in your shoes. My blood ran cold. I reread the words, my mind racing. This was one of them. Someone from Jessica's past. Someone she had deceived and thought she had left behind. Someone who had been watching, waiting. And now, they were handing me the match to burn everything down. I inhaled sharply, my fingers hesitating over the screen. But before I could respond, another message appeared. You want to get even? I can help. My heart pounded against my ribs. My instincts warned me to stop, to think. But that cautious voice, the one that might have hesitated, was drowned out by something sharper, something undeniable. I wasn't going to just sit here and take it. Jessica had played me. Now, I was going to play her. I tapped the screen, rereading the message once more. You want to get even? I can help. Every rational part of me screamed to be careful. This was a stranger, someone with their own motives. But at this moment, caution felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts as I typed back. I'm listening. The response came almost immediately. Good. But first, do you want revenge or the truth? I hesitated. My mind screamed for revenge, for something that would make Jessica feel even a fraction of what I felt now. But another part of me, the part that had spent years trusting her, needed to know everything. Every lie, every deception. Because the truth, that was the real weapon. Both. This time, there was a pause. It was as if they were considering my answer. And then let's start with the truth. Do you know where she really is right now? I frowned, glancing at the clock. Jessica had only left 20 minutes ago. She was with Nathan. Where else would she be? With her boyfriend. Nathan. A few seconds passed before the next message appeared. Check his location. I stared at the words, my grip tightening around the phone. I didn't have Nathan's location. But Jessica? We had been sharing our locations for years, mostly out of convenience. The daily routines, the unexpected twists, the trivial concerns that once felt so significant. All of them seemed like a cruel joke now. I hadn't even thought to check the app in months. There had been no reason to. But tonight, everything changed. My heart pounded as I launched the app, my thumb hovering over her name before I finally tapped. The map took a second to load, and when it did, my stomach lurched. Jessica wasn't at Nathan's place. She wasn't anywhere near it. Instead, she was clear across town, parked at a hotel. Not just any hotel, a luxury one, a place I knew all too well because I had taken her there once before. A rush of searing anger surged through me, tightening every muscle in my body. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might shatter. My fingers moved before I could think, firing off a message at lightning speed. The words hit the screen before I even realized I had sent them. What the hell is she doing at a hotel? 3 dots flickered on the screen, signaling a response. Then, a message appeared. Guess she didn't tell Nathan about her other plans. A cold, bitter laugh escaped my throat. Jessica wasn't just deceitful. She had perfected the act of deception, turning it into second nature. She had spent years playing the game, twisting reality to her advantage. And worst of all, she truly believed she was in control. I grabbed my car keys, my grip so tight my knuckles turned white. If she thought she could simply walk away from this, walk away from me, without consequences, she was about to get the shock of her life. The drive to the hotel was a blur. Streetlights streaked across my windshield, smearing into glowing trails as I sped through the city. My mind was a storm of emotions, rage, betrayal, a fierce sense of determination. Jessica thought she had won, that she had escaped cleanly, leaving me behind in the wreckage of a marriage she had been dismantling long before tonight. But she was wrong. Tonight, I refused to be the fool. I pulled into the hotel's parking lot, killing the engine. The place was as sleek and extravagant as I remembered, towering glass windows, a sharp, modern design, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Checking the app once more, I saw her location hadn't changed. She was still inside. As I stepped out of the car, the night air bit at my skin. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Room 814. Go see for yourself. Exhaling sharply, I slipped the phone into my pocket. This was it. Inside, the lobby was hushed, the quiet hum of jazz music filtering through hidden speakers. I didn't stop at the front desk. My path was set. I walked straight to the elevators, my pulse drumming in my ears. 8th floor. Room 814. As the elevator doors slid shut, my reflection stared back at me in the polished metal. The man looking back was barely recognizable. A soft chime signaled the elevator's arrival. I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. Room 814 stood before me, the gold numbers gleaming under the soft lighting. The reality of the situation hit me like a brick wall. Jessica was inside, and she wasn't alone. I knocked once. No response. A second knock, harder this time. I heard movement. Then, a voice. A man's. Not Jessica's. Something inside me snapped. My fist slammed against the door. Jessica. Open the door. Silence. Then frantic whispers from inside. I wasn't waiting. My hand shot to the handle, shoving hard. It wasn't locked. The door swung open, crashing against the wall. Jessica stood frozen in the center of the room, her face draining of all color. She wore a silk robe, her damp hair clinging to her shoulders as if she had just stepped out of the shower. But my focus wasn't on her. Across the room, fumbling with the buttons of his shirt, his face locked in sheer horror, Nathan. The world ground to a halt. I blinked. Once. Twice. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. You've got to be kidding me. Jessica took a cautious step forward, hands raised as if trying to soothe a wild animal. Ethan. I pointed at Nathan, my voice barely steady. You? I thought you were supposed to be the real relationship. A bitter laugh escaped me. Turns out you're just another one of her side projects. Nathan stood rigid, his face ashen. His gaze darted between me and Jessica, realization dawning like a cruel joke he was only now understanding. Wait, his voice cracked. Jessica, what the hell is he talking about? Jessica's mask of control started to fracture. Nathan's voice rose, his confusion giving way to anger. You were cheating on him. With me. And now you're cheating on me? A sharp laugh burst from my throat, raw and uncontrollable. I clapped a hand on his shoulder, and he recoiled. Welcome to my world, buddy. Nathan staggered back as if burned, shaking his head in disbelief. Are you serious right now? He turned to Jessica, his face twisting with something darker than anger, disgust. You told me you left him for me. That we were. He let out a frustrated breath, running a hand through his hair. Jesus. You're unbelievable. Jessica's expression shifted, her frustration snapping into something sharper. Oh. Grow up, Nathan. Her voice cut through the room, defensive now, as if she was the one who had been wronged. What did you think this was? Some fairy tale romance. She rolled her eyes. Please. You knew exactly what this was. Nathan's expression hardened, disbelief shifting into something closer to revulsion. Wow. He exhaled sharply. You're actually worse than I thought. Jessica's lips curled into a sneer. Spare me the moral outrage. You were sleeping with a married woman. The air in the room was thick with tension. Nathan let out a slow, measured breath. You know what? You two deserve each other. He snatched his jacket off the chair, shaking his head as he moved toward the door. I'm out. He stormed past me, shoving the door open without so much as a backward glance. The door slammed shut behind him, and in that instant, silence swallowed the room. Now, it was just the two of us. Jessica let out a slow breath, rubbing her temples as though she were exhausted, as if I had somehow dragged her into this situation. Well, she muttered, her voice carrying a note of exasperation. That was dramatic. I stared at her, really looked at her. There was no regret on her face, no panic in her expression. Instead, there was only annoyance. Taking a slow, deliberate step forward, I kept my voice unnervingly steady. You do understand, don't you, Jessica? You have nothing left. She smirked, actually smirked. Please. I'll be just fine. I returned the smile, though mine carried none of the confidence hers did. No, you won't. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. Excuse me. Without another word, I pulled out my phone, tapped my screen, and turned it toward her. As her gaze fell on the images, the messages, the undeniable proof, her face transformed. The color drained from her skin, her lips parted slightly as if the air had suddenly grown too thick to breathe. Jessica's smirk vanished in an instant, almost comically fast. Her eyes darted across the screen, scanning every incriminating detail, the texts, the pictures, the evidence of everything she had done. Her voice, now barely above a whisper, cracked as she spoke. Where did you get this? Tilting my head slightly, I feigned contemplation. Oh, you know, I said, my tone casual. A little gift from someone who knows exactly what it's like to be in my shoes. I tapped the screen lightly. They sent me everything. Every message. Every email. Every single lie. Jessica swallowed hard, her throat visibly tightening. Her hands twitched at her sides, yet her body remained rigid, as though she were frozen in place. I had never seen her like this before, off balance, uncertain. For once, she was no longer in control. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. So tell me, Jessica, was it worth it? She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no sound came out. Her wide eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Not guilt, not shame, fear. Because Jessica had never expected to face the consequences of her actions. She had assumed she could simply walk away, that I would be left behind, some broken, humiliated fool, while she started fresh. She thought she could erase me. What she had failed to realize was that I was no longer the same person she had spent years manipulating. Jessica took a shaky breath, attempting to compose herself. She lifted her chin slightly, forcing an air of confidence that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So what?" she challenged, though her voice wavered. "What exactly are you going to do, Ethan? Blackmail me?" She scoffed, shaking her head. "That's pathetic." I let out a quiet chuckle. "Blackmail?" I echoed, slipping my phone back into my pocket. "No, Jessica. I don't need to blackmail you." She stiffened. "Then what?" I smiled. "I'm just going to tell the truth." Her entire body tensed. Leaning in slightly, I let my words sink in. "Everyone's going to know, Jessica. Every single person." I lifted a finger, counting them off. "Nathan? He already got a bit of a wake-up call, didn't he?" My grin widened. "But I'm sure he'll appreciate seeing all the proof. Just in case he ever feels the need to warn the next guy." Jessica's breath grew shallow. I stepped forward again. "And your friends?" I added. "Oh, I'm sure they'd love to hear the real story. The ones who still believe you were just some poor, trapped wife looking for a way out? Yeah, let's see how long that sympathy lasts." Her jaw clenched. "You wouldn't." I shrugged. "Wouldn't I?" Panic flickered across her face. Her gaze darted sideways, searching for an escape. I tilted my head, watching her closely. "But you know who I think would be most interested in all of this?" Jessica didn't answer, but I could see it in her eyes. She already knew. I grinned. "Your job." The silence between us became sharp, almost suffocating. Jessica's expression collapsed, the blood draining from her face. "Ethan." No, I interrupted smoothly. "Let's talk about that for a second. Because from what I've heard, your company has a rather strict policy about workplace relationships, don't they?" Jessica's lips parted, but all that escaped was a shallow breath. "You." Her voice barely registered. "You don't know anything." I tapped my pocket. "Oh, but I do." Her body went still. I watched her mind race, her thoughts spiraling as she mentally flipped through every possible mistake, every secret she thought was buried. I let her sit with that dread, let her feel the same suffocating weight I had felt when I first uncovered the truth. Then, I said it. "I know about Daniel." Jessica's knees nearly buckled. Her mouth opened and closed uselessly, her wide eyes reflecting pure disbelief. Bingo. Daniel. Her boss. The real reason she had been untouchable at work. The reason she had always carried herself like someone immune to consequences. I inhaled deeply, savoring the moment. "What do you think happens when this information reaches the right inbox, Jessica? What do you think happens when your carefully crafted world crumbles?" She stumbled back a step, visibly trembling. Her lips pressed into a tight line, her entire body on the verge of breaking. And then, at last, she snapped. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the pressure. I smiled. Now, for the first time, I held all the power. Jessica's words lingered in the air, sharp with desperation. "What do you want?" she asked. I let the question settle between us, watching as she squirmed, as she came to the painful realization that she had finally trapped herself in a situation she couldn't charm, lie, or manipulate her way out of. I took a slow step forward, keeping my voice composed. "You really want to know what I want?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "I want to know how it feels." Her breath hitched. "How it feels?" I leaned in just enough for her to feel the weight of my words. "To win." A flicker of unease crossed her face. She flinched, only slightly, but I noticed it. And for the first time, I felt a deep, undeniable satisfaction. For years, she had orchestrated every move, stacked the deck in her favor, led me on like an afterthought. She had assumed, without a second of doubt, that she could walk away unscathed while I remained behind, mourning a marriage that had been hollow long before I even realized it. But now? Now, she was the one losing everything. The confidence that once radiated from her was gone. The smirk she had worn so easily had vanished. Jessica was no longer in control. I was. And she knew it. She swallowed hard. "Ethan." I lifted a hand, cutting her off. "This is how it's going to go," I said firmly. Jessica clenched her jaw but stayed silent. She had finally learned when to keep quiet. I took my time, making sure she absorbed every word. "You're going to leave. You're going to walk out of this hotel." You're going to walk away from me, from this entire mess you created. And you're going to stay silent. Her fingers twitched. And if I don't? Without a word, I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward her. Then Daniel gets a little surprise in his inbox, I said evenly. HR2. And maybe, just for fun, his wife. Jessica paled instantly. She understood exactly what that meant, losing her job, losing the safety net that had shielded her for so long, losing everything she had meticulously built. Her lips parted, like she wanted to fight back, to come up with some excuse, some final attempt at control. But there was nothing left to say. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and smiled. Thought so. Jessica's throat bobbed as she swallowed. I could see the war raging in her mind, the desperate urge to claw back even a fraction of power. But she had nothing left to hold on to. She had already lost. After a long moment, she let out a shaky breath. Fine. I nodded. Good. Then, just because I could, I added, now get out. Her face twisted with frustration, her nails digging into her palms, but she didn't argue. Without another word, she turned and walked past me, out the door, and down the hall. I didn't bother watching her go. I didn't need to. For the first time, I didn't care. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders back. My body felt lighter, my mind clearer than it had been in years. Walking over to the window, I gazed down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Jessica was vanishing into the night, her world crumbling in ways she had never anticipated. And me? I was finally free.